Hi, everyone. I wanted to give you a brief recap of our time together before I hand you off to Rebecca for part 2 of Online Learning Foundations. You have a week break, and that second part of the course begins, I should say, on April 20th. The course is open, so if you want to go in and look at resources and get started and make some notes, feel free. But you do have a week break, and she will be looking for you to enter that course and begin the work on April 20th. So first of all, let me say thank you for your participation over the last few weeks. Thank you for being willing to learn new things and try new things and stretch your comfort zone and just become immersed in online learning. This is an intensive experience, and we do that because we don't really have a lot of time to demonstrate to you how an online course feels. You know, it's a lot. We have a lot of content to cover in 4 weeks, and this first 2 weeks being intensive conversation, really it does make it an intensive course. So thank you for being willing to dive in. Thank you for being responsive when I asked you to reply to things or I contacted you. I really appreciate that participation. I wanted to just give you a brief recap on some things that you noticed or may have wondered about as it relates to our online conversation. One is, I think you picked up on how social online classes can be. However, that's done with intention and it's done explicitly. So, for example, all the face-to-face cues that you might get in conversation, my voice tone, my facial expression, nodding my head for understanding, are gone in online conversation. So I think you gathered either from the video tips or your own experience that you have to be explicit and intentional about putting those in. With your voice tone, the way you might emphasize a word, how you might choose to phrase a sentence, all matter in online conversation. So for example, one thing I've learned to do is I might be reading one of your posts and I might be smiling as I read it, but you don't know that I'm smiling, so I have to tell you that. So I might reply to your post and say, I smiled as I read your comment about such and such, and then I might tell you about my reaction and why I reacted. I could really get a sense of your personalities through our discussion because of the way you posted and the words you chose. I think I got this sense that this social part was a pleasant surprise for some of you, that learning to be engaged and learning to build relationships can be done online, but it does take some focus and purpose and intention. So thank you for doing that. Another thing I wanted to point out was the difference between large group and small group discussion. So we went from 2 large group discussions the first week to 1 large group and 1 small group discussion the second week. In the second week with the small group, that was to give you some sense of how that would feel in one of your own courses if you put students into small groups. So one of the pros of that is that you can get deeper into conversation, but one of the cons of that is that you might run out of conversation depending on the size of your group or the subject matter. So just weigh that as you design a course and know that there are different reasons and different outcomes to putting students together in small groups. You might want to group them by subject matter. You might want to build relationships. You might want to make it for a task as a precursor to a presentation. So again, because of the short nature of our course, I threw you in both of those fairly quickly. So that's just a recap, kind of what that felt like. The other thing I wanted to remind you about was how I changed my participation as we went over. I went from being pretty visibly present the first week to not as present over the first few days of conversation in the second week. And I did that on purpose to allow you to build conversation and build relationships and build community with each other. You know, I think we've all had experiences as instructor where we can be friendly and engaging with our students, but when we sit down at their small group table, the conversation is going to change. It's just going to be different if I'm sitting there than when they're talking amongst themselves. So I really wanted you to develop that. So I just wanted to point that out in case that wasn't clear to you why I wasn't in there maybe as much the second week. That was to give you a sense of, okay, the first week, it's really good to be in there, helping people out, answering questions, asking questions to pull out a little more dialogue, being warm and welcoming. And then the second week, tapering off a little bit. In this case, because we only had 2 weeks, that's what I had to do it. You might do it more gradually in your own course. So thank you for your time and attention. Again, it was a pleasure working with you, and I hope we get to work together some more in the future, either directly in course design or as part of your online certification completion plan. So I will let Rebecca facilitate the next part, although I will be present there, so I can learn some new tips and ideas from you, as well as some areas of interest that you might have going forward for when we work together down the road. Take care and best wishes.